Karen.
Mr Chair, thank you. I'd like to take a call as one of a number, I hope, in the committee stage of this bill. There are so many things to talk about, so I'm going to start with trying to get, as I see it, to the heart of the issue for Labor in particular, which is around the suspension issue and whether or not people's internet accounts should and ever be terminated, which is something that Labor feels very strongly against, and which is why we're supporting this bill, because we actually have reached a compromise where, while termination remains in the bill, it is not and will not be enacted unless by an order in Council. Before I do that, I just want to say and have it clearly on the record that Labor absolutely supports our local artists, musicians and creative industries whose successes have shaped New Zealand and the very face of New Zealand inside our country and internationally. And I think that's really important to put on the record, because there's a number of the speakers have mentioned about the importance of our creative industries. Well, and I just also want to put on the record that it's not only important to support them in words, it's also important to support them in deeds. And that means by supporting, our public media, our public broadcasting, our public creative industries. And unfortunately, we're not going in that direction in this country at the moment. We're going in the other direction by making cuts to them. And the cut to TVNZ 7 is probably one of the most significant cuts in terms of funding a new digital channel in our new digital environment, which is where we should be putting our investment, and unfortunately we're not. I want to read to you from one of the submissions put before the Select Committee. Before I do that, I'd also like to acknowledge the extraordinarily committed and dedicated and intelligent hard work done by the officials during this debate. There was an awful lot of debate in the Select Committee. There were some new cutting-edge issues discussed, and while some of the members around the table had a bit more of an idea than others about what was being talked about at times, and you were very patient, I'd just like to acknowledge the work that you did by coming back over and over again with more analysis and more definition around some of the issues. Just to give you a picture on this, and I'll be honest about this, one of my colleagues came to me recently and said, I want to get access to a piece of music. It's my favourite song. I've loved this song for years. I can't buy it anywhere. I don't know where to find it. I've tried everywhere. It's not on Amazon. I can't get it in a shop. I don't know how to get it. And so she said, what do I do? And I said, well, have you been on the internet and looked for it? Yes, but all these sites keep coming up. And so I said, I'll ask for some advice. And so I went and asked for some advice. And the advice that came back to me was the only way to get this song, because it's not sold anywhere anymore, it's not available in any shop, is to go to one of the BitTorrent sites and download it illegally. Now, my colleague would not do that and did not do that, but it gives you an idea that this is why so many people are file sharing, downloading content illegally in an environment where they either can't get access to material because it's not available in any other form, or they can't get access to it because it's not available in their jurisdiction, because the material hasn't been released. And this is an unacceptable issue, and it's the reason. What it demonstrates is flawed business models across the industry that aren't responding to consumer demand. And every submitter that came before the Select Committee who represented a rights holder was asked the question by me, do you have a business model in train to file share, to enable people to file share legally, and Mr Chair.
I call the honourable member Claire Curran.
Asked whether they had a business model in train to enable people to file share legally, and the answer was no. And this is essentially a failure of the market, and is the reason why we are looking at this legislation today, which is putting in place a regime to I guess, hopefully educate people to cease for the file sharing activities that are being talked about, 70 million items being downloaded illegally. But the only problem is that the alternatives they have aren't great, and this is one of the core issues. So I want to read to you from the submission from Internet New Zealand.
Order. The members referring to the person in the chair when they use the word.
Mr. Chair, my apologies. I wish to read to the House the introductory points from Internet New Zealand. Internet New Zealand is an organisation which could be described as very future thinking, represents many in the industry who are internet service providers, but also people who are passionate about the internet, and is what one would describe as a moderate organisation, as well as being future thinking. They said, "This bill is a major improvement on the legislation that it seeks to replace, that infringing file sharing is happening and cannot be condoned, but it is important to consider the effects of it before deciding how to tackle it, and that the copyright content industries are doing exceptionally well given the global economic situation. Sales are up and more money than ever is going to Kiwi artists. This success shows that file sharing is not having a damaging impact on the industry, and that the evidence presented so that the effect has been deemed unreliable by, among others, the United States government. Because the impact of file sharing does not seem to be major, Parliament should not take major, complicated and expensive steps to address it. It should not allow the content industry to seek aid in propping up an unsustainable business model. The best way to tackle file sharing would be to impose a notice and notice regime where those found infringing get told their activity has been picked up." Now, that was reflective of a number of submissions. The Creative Freedom Foundation is another one who started off their submission by saying that we support the purpose of this bill. Changes in technology that have made copying easier have led to the need for new copyright enforcement processes that are effective for artists as well as rights holders, while maintaining due process protections. We had a number of submissions from reasonable organisations who are in a future thinking space, who were saying to us there needs to be some enforcement measures in place, but they need to be very moderate, and we need to address the fact that there are flawed business models, and that that the draconian measures of termination, suspension, whatever you want to call it, are an overreacting to the size of the infringement. So that is essentially the basis for the opposition to the termination account suspension as a remedy for file sharing. It's disproportionate to the problem, won't solve it, because ultimately we're still left with the issue of where people can get their content legally. Now, there are many places on the internet where people can get their content legally, but unfortunately many of those places you have to sign up, and you know that those business models are starting to emerge, but they're not by any means available right across the industry. They're not available to the most of the ordinary people in New Zealand. And another very good example of where of a absolutely getting to the guts of this issue in which I mentioned in my first reading speech, was the movie that I think won the Oscar.
I call the honourable member Pisata Sam Lutuinga.
Thank you, Mr.